Hello and welcome to my first long and unedited video about FF14 optimization, specifically for Dragoon. In this video, I'm going to talk about why starting a fight with elusive jump or sprinting at the boss and using true thrust to start your rotation is not always optimal. Some disclaimers: this is very high-end optimization and I wouldn't worry about it if you're new. This won't give you a significant DPS increase, at most single-digit amounts. Also, because this plays around your GCD timer so much, third-party tools like Reaction and FFXIV Alexander with FPS alignment can make a big difference in gaining effect from this, and also just give a slight advantage in general. Also, this is very fight dependent. This will only have an effect on fights with downtime, and even then, not all of them. So starting off, let's talk about how a fight actually starts in this game. So the fight starts when the boss gets aggroed, and the boss will either get aggroed when it takes damage, like this, or if someone enters its aggro range. So as a melee or a tank, you primarily care about the aggro range. However, we're gonna talk about the damage first. I'm gonna swap to Black Mage. So every skill in this game has an attached delay for when it actually deals damage, usually tied to the animation. So Fire 3 has a cast time of 3.2 seconds, which is actually 2.7 seconds-ish, which has to do with like the snapshot and slide cast. Don't worry about it, that's not the point. So it's 2.7 cast, then it finishes, and it has a 1.3 second delay. So when I press Fire 3, it will take 4 seconds from that point to actually deal damage and aggro the boss. So if I start a countdown of 10 seconds, not bad. At 4 seconds, I can press Fire 3, and I will not early pull the boss. Like such. So by abusing the delay on your ranged casts and skills, ranged classes can start their rotation before the countdown ends. Obviously, on Dragoon, you do not gain much from this because you are not casting a skill. On Dragoon, how you would generally start a fight is you want to wait for as long as possible, and then mostly just elusive jump, and then start rolling your GCD. So the reason you want to elusive jump as late as possible is because the moment you enter the aggro range for a boss, you can start getting aggroed. So around every 2 seconds, the server will check if there is a player in the aggro range of the boss. If yes, then you will get aggroed. Due to this, it's very possible that, let's say I'm right outside the aggro range, I could press elusive and I could get instantly aggroed, or I could press elusive and not get aggroed at all, and I would pull the boss by doing damage to it instead. However, to not constantly early pull and annoy everyone around you, you should try to, for elusive jumps specifically, you should use it at around 0.8 seconds pre-pull, which is the animation lock that it has, meaning that you will be able to roll your GCD exactly on 0 seconds of the countdown, and you'll minimize the chances of you early pulling. You should also try to use elusive jump from as far as possible, so you won't be in the aggro range of the boss for as long of a time, instead of, for example, doing it sideways or just starting very close and like going through the boss or whatever. However, it is actually possible, even on Dragoon, to abuse the damage delay to start your rotation early instead. So on Dragoon, you can make use of 2 range skills, which are Piercing Talon and Doom Spike for this. Piercing Talon has a range of 20 yalms, very far. Doom Spike not so much, it's half, it's 10 yalms. Basically, any fight in the game will let you use Piercing Talon. Some fights will let you use Doom Spike. So let's talk about the application delay on Dragoon. So here you can see the application delay of the 4 most important skills for pull-in. True Thrust and Disembowel will become important when we talk about wall bosses and mouse over macros later. For now, Pearson Talon has a 0.85 second application delay. Doomspike has around a 1.3 second application delay. Meaning that at 0.85 seconds is when I can use Pearson Talon, and I will not early pull. It will not aggro me until Pearson Talon actually deals damage. Because of this, when I do that, my GCD will advance 0.8 seconds more than if I were to just elusive jump in and then press true thrust at 0 seconds. Even more so, if you use Doomspike, you can do it at 1.3 seconds instead. Like this. However, Doomspike is only 110 potency, whereas Pearson Talon is 150, so it's not as exciting. But it can still be worth it. So, let's see. An additional effect that doing this can have is that it does change your GCD timing. Starting with Pearson Talon makes it so your chaotic sprint comes out late enough to where you can justifiably use Battle Litany before chaotic sprint. If you choose to do this, then my advice would be that for your second usage at 2 minutes, you once again use it on cooldown, because delaying it wouldn't change the value for yourself at all. And at that point in the fight, it should still be better to use it on cooldown for your party, in most cases. And at 4 minutes, you should drift it to the next GCD, because it'll gain more value for yourself, and due to the natural drift almost all raid buffs in this game have, that Dragoon doesn't have, it'll match up with other people anyways. So I have a pretty scuffed example of using range skills to pull the boss. So here I am in Suzaku Extreme, unsynced, very cool. So in this first example, I'm going to use Elusive Jump, and as you'd normally expect, I'm gonna go into True Thrust and just roll my GCDs. So after 15 seconds or so, Suzaku's gonna go untargetable. So I'm gonna hit this Vorpal Thrust, and then right before my Heaven's Thrust, the boss leaves, right before it goes off. So then I let myself get killed, I come back. Now we try it again, but with Pearson Talon. So Pearson Talon will allow me to roll my GCD slightly sooner. So I do have to say, this example is not actually realistic, because as you can see here, I got pretty lucky, and I was like 300 milliseconds, maybe even more. I think my auto attack actually pulled the boss, so I got pretty good time that you usually wouldn't actually get. Usually it would have pulled instantly. Which is why, when I use Pearson Talon and I gain 0.8 seconds on my GCD roll, it'll allow me to use that extra GCD that I was just not able to use before, but I did not actually gain enough time to get the damage application. So because I'm starting with Pearson Talon, when I get the extra GCD, it will not be the next GCD, which would have been Heaven's Thrust, but because I basically added a filler GCD to the start of my rotation, it means that the GCD I'm gonna end on is still Vorpal Thrust, but additionally to hitting the Vorpal Thrust, I'm getting a Pearson Talon for free. However, because I didn't gain enough time, as you can see, the boss goes away before the application delay of Vorpal Thrust, which is around 0.8 seconds, I believe, meaning that the damage did not actually hit. So this final example now, I will use Doomspike instead. So Doomspike gains me another 0.45 seconds over what Pearson Talon gained me. I will fast forward and show you that it barely gains me enough time for the Vorpal Thrust to actually apply to the boss. Like this. So what this means is that in example number 1, I got the damage of my GCDs up to Vorpal Thrust. in example number 2, where I used Piercing Talon, this was bad because I basically replaced my 280 potency Vorpal Thrust that with Power Surge is 308 potency for a raw 150 potency Piercing Talon. So I lost 158 potency in this example, but in the final example, I didn't lose anything, right? I still get the Vorpal Thrust at the end, and I've never gotten the Heaven's Thrust at the end, so I didn't lose anything. All that happened is that I gained the Doom Spike. So Doom Spike is 110 potency. Obviously you don't have Power Surge yet. So all that happened is I gained 110 flat potency for free. Now in this situation, this is actually what I would do. So I might make a video later on about food swap-in and melt swap-in, which are basically your other options in this whole GCD micro optimization stuff, where you could gain a GCD by simply changing your skill speed instead. In this case, however, this uptime is so short, being only like 15 seconds, or actually I think it might be like 25 seconds, I don't know. No, it's like 15 seconds. So this is so short that the amount of skill speed required to land this Heaven's Thrust, because I would need probably only 0.01 GCD tier lower to roll the skill, but to actually get to the damage application part of it, which is around 0.6 seconds, I would probably need to drop an entire 0.05 GCD tiers, or maybe even more. This could be worth it if I'm able to melt swap. So if I start with enough skill speed melts, and then during the downtime I remelt my gear to not have that skill speed anymore, it could be worth it. However, Suzaku's downtime afterwards is both too short and forces you to move your character, if you have to respect it, of course. So you don't have enough time to remeld like fucking your entire gear, right? So in this case, Doom Spike would be optimal. Now, it is worth considering still the effect that it has, as I said, on your buffs, like using Litany before Chaotic Sprint, but it also delays your other OGCDs. It doesn't necessarily have to delay them, but it changes them, right? This is not often gonna matter, but it theoretically could, and especially if you're using this for speed kills, it's very important that you look into how your OGCD times are affected by this. So hopefully that explains how you can use range skills to start the fight instead. Now let's talk about door bosses. So for door bosses, instead of using range skills, you're also able to use, well, you're able to use basically anything. You can use mouse over macros to generally gain more potency. So let's look back at this image. So True Thrust has a application delay of 0.75 seconds, and Disembowel has an application delay of 1.65 seconds, which is ridiculously long. So why are you not pressing True Thrust or Disembowel? Why are you using a macro instead? So when you cast an action on a target, at that moment, I can show, it'll also immediately prepare your auto attack, at least for physical ranged and melee classes, I believe. I think physical range too, not for casters. But yeah, so you can see here, at 0.0000, everything starts to go off. Obviously, that's when the combat starts. And then after 0.53 seconds, my auto attack hits the boss. So no matter what skill you use, even if I use Piercing Talon here, whatever, I will pull the boss after 0.53 seconds if I do it like this, because my auto attack will go off and pull the boss. How you prevent that from happening is using mouse over skills. If you use a mouse over skill without targeting the boss, it'll simply use the skill without starting your auto attacks. Now obviously you don't want to delay your auto attack too much. If you want to be safe, you can simply check the log to see how much leeway your auto attack has, but it's generally just a good idea to manually start your auto attack quickly after you do your mouse over GCD. So you do your mouse over, and then because true thrust is so fast, you can basically just immediately start your auto. In disembowel's case, so disembowel has a 1.6 huge application delay, as you can see here. It takes ages. However, you basically never ever want to use that entire 1.6 seconds. If you're using that entire 1.6 seconds, you're never gaining potency. The reason for that is, I will show here. So this changed on FF logs with the recent rates here. It used to be displayed differently, but I'm gonna use the new display to explain it because it makes more sense to do that. So this minus 0.9 seconds here basically is when the Reaper casts Harp. This is the first cast in the log. Obviously when the first cast happens is when FF logs and ACT start registering stuff. And when FF log says that the combat has basically started. This does not apply to speed kills. As far as I know, I think they changed it to fix it for speed kills. But this does apply to your DPS output. So this is basically, let's round this up and say that this was a 1 second pre-pull. So 1 second before the boss was pulled, someone started casting something, and then after a second, it actually hit the boss and the combat started. So let's say in the first second of combat, I do 2 DPS. Or no, I do 2 damage, right? So in 1 second of actual combat time with the boss being pulled, I did 2 DPS then, because I did 2 damage in 1 second, so 2 damage per second. However, FF logs, if you check, would say that I did 1 DPS, because the minus 1 second pre-pull is when FF logs considers the fight to have started for your DPS. So this is mostly going to be irrelevant. The only case where this really matters is if you're going to use disembowel to pre-pull by more than 1.3 seconds. Why is this a thing? It's because in your party, so the most, so other people are also pre-pulling, right? Some big jobs for this are Black Mage, as I said before, also has a 1.3 second precast. White Mage has a 1.3 second precast. Astro has a 1.1 second precast. And then the other healers are both like 0.8. But basically with any comp, especially because you're never going to have Scholar Sage, you can basically guarantee that someone else is pre-pulling the fight by a full second. So using Doom Spike at 1.3 or using Disembowel at 1.3 at most is adding 300 milliseconds to your total log time, which will never be a DPS loss basically. It could theoretically be, but generally not. It's when it starts being over 50 or 500 milliseconds. So if the next fastest person who hit the boss, or well, started casting on the boss, did so at 0.8 seconds, and you did so at 1.3 seconds, that's when both these things, Doom Spike and Disembowel, start to become a loss, like, just for sure. But if you're not adding that much time to the log, then this is basically always a DPS gain. Obviously for speed kills, I believe this doesn't matter at all anymore, they fixed this. But for DPS, it does exist still, so you should be conscious of that. And you should aim to, if you care about your DPS, you should aim to never pre-pull Disembowel by that much. You'd also be griefing other people's DPS in the process. So now I'm going to talk about what is one of the most interesting fights to apply this to, which is P7S. So I'm going to use Jitterbug's POV. Thank you very much, Jitterbug, I'm stealing it. To show this. So P7S, the last tier Savage fight, around 40 seconds into the fight, will cast Immortal's Obol, a proximity AoE that knocks you back or up, that sounds weird, and basically stuns you. Dragoon players will know that on 2.5 this happens right before your GCD roll. It happens again at right past 6 minutes, and for Dragoon this will basically once again, if you never clipped on 2.5 and you're using FPS alignment, be right on your GCD roll. So let's look at when this knockback actually happens and how it actually happens. So to do that, I need to first explain the change on FF logs. So in the past, it didn't used to say -seconds when something is pre-pull. It simply started the log there at 0 seconds. So for this log that I'm going to be using, you can see that the first cast is when 0 seconds happens, but the first damage application is an entire 1.3 seconds almost later. So for everything that happens in this log, if you want the actual combat time in-game, you'd have to subtract 1.3 seconds, or 1.25 to be exact. So let's look at when the damage happens. So this damage event, for most knockbacks, the damage being applied to your character is when the knockback is also applied to your character. There's one other interesting thing to notice here, is that the knockback, or well, the damage applying to each of the party members has a delay of around 45 seconds per player. The delay between the first player being hit and the final player being hit is around 300 milliseconds, or 0.3 seconds. You might notice that I am the last person getting hit. That is not coincidence. Most of these knockbacks, such as P7S or P9S as well, will hit the closest person first. So you can see that the monk got hit first. The prepare and the damage are both the same. The monk is the closest, and then the astro is, I believe, the second closest, and I am the furthest. Pretty easy to tell. So it's always gonna work like that. So by being the furthest player, I made sure that I always got that additional 0.3 seconds of leeway to hit my GCD. So at this point, if we subtract 1.25 seconds off the timer here from the log, because that's the actual combat time, we realize that 44.5 seconds is basically when I got knocked back as the last player. Now, obviously, that 0.5 seconds is going to be... So at 45 seconds is when your 2.5 GCD would come off, because 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, etc. You'd have a GCD at 45 seconds flat with reaction or FPS alignment. If you pre-pull perfectly without a mouse overskill, your auto attack is going to pre-pull by 0.5 seconds, which means that it's technically possible to pre-pull without a mouse overskill and barely hit your GCD. However, this is way too inconsistent and basically never gonna work, like once in 1,000 times. So what you want to do is you mouse over true thrust, right? This gains you 0.7 seconds of the 0.5 seconds that you needed to gain. So doing this, the 45.8 seconds on the log when I got hit by the knockback, I got to press my Fang and Claw at 44 or 45.5. So 0.2 or 0.3 seconds before. With a tiny bit of leeway, but that leeway is actually smaller. It looks like a lot, but it's not. So I gained a GCD. I gained a full GCD. The average GCD on Dragoon is worth around 360 potency. Obviously it affects your alignment as well, but that's easily 300 potency gained. On average, like kill time dependent. However, this is not actually optimal. That's the funny thing about P7S. You have to consider that getting stunned last, which the stun is about 2.5 seconds. Your entire GCD rolls reset. Getting stunned last also means you get to roll your next GCD as the last person. The first person will get to roll their next GCD after being stunned, 0.3 seconds faster before me in this case. Which leads to why the actual optimal choice... Well, let me tell you this first. So if I go to... This is the wrong log. It's 5. So if I'm lucky, I picked the log where I actually get this. I believe it's right in thrust. Okay, please cooperate. So right in thrust. Yeah. So in this log, I did actually get my right and thrust before the second knockback that happens at 6 minutes and some extra. This one, well, it's some awful quality, but whatever. You get the point. But this GCD becomes basically a like 1 in 10 occurrence when you're doing it this way. Because you're landing less, that 0.3 seconds that you're missing is massive for this. This is ridiculously tight. I got it like twice, so it's kind of lucky that I picked a log where I did get it. Here, it looks like I got it at least. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's 2.5 seconds. But it's way too rare, right? Like 1 in 10 times. However, you could flip the whole script, do something else. You can start the fight instead by using mouse over disembowel at 1 second pre-pull. Doing this at 1 second pre-pull means that you will have enough leeway to take the first knockback instead of the final one. However, instead of gaining a full GCD, all you're gaining is the 140 potency of the raw disembowel. And once again, your GCD to OGCD alignment is going to be different. But because of doing this, you now have a 100% success rate on landing your extra GCD on the second knockback. So you're guaranteeing what is basically half a GCD worth of potency gain, and you're guaranteeing a full GCD worth of potency gain later. As opposed to guaranteeing that you get the first one, well, it's not even entirely guaranteed, it's kind of iffy. And very much gambling on most likely not getting the final one. Even if you were to do 1,000 or 2,000 kills of P7S, I would not ever do the option where you're going for the gamble GCD. Like a 1 in 10 run GCD is just way too rare. You're gonna waste your good crit runs on what could have been better runs, which is why you do something that might seem unoptimal but is actually better. So once again, you would do mouse over disembowel. I believe that I've gone through basically everything I can say. So there's one more example that I guess I'll give quickly. On, once again, Jitterbugs VOD, thank you very much. On P6S as well, last year, this is just gonna be fast. At 2 minutes and around 40 seconds, you have a mechanic where a cone comes out of your ass or your face, and you get stunned. This happens right here, and Dragoon players will know that you are about halfway into your being able to press your Vorpal thrust on 2.5. You're slightly over halfway. This boss starts close enough for you to pull with Doomspike. Doomspike gains you 1.3 seconds minimum over what you are gonna be at if you were to just elusive jump in. 1.3 second is slightly over half your GCD. TLDR, Doomspike lets you hit this GCD. Or well, if you use Doomspike at the start, why is the quality so shit? If you use Doomspike at the start, you will still be on right and thrust at this point. The only difference is that you got a Doomspike for free. So that's another case where it's optimal. Generally, there's mostly going to be uses for stuff like this, for these pre-pull thins, in fights where you cannot food swap or cannot melt swap because of either the downtime being a stun or because of needing way too much skill speed, like in the case of Suzaku earlier. So I really hope this kind of clarified the point of it. Very scuffed video. If you actually enjoyed this and you'd like to see more, then feel free to suggest topics or just let me know that I should make another video. I have some ideas in mind of stuff that I could do. Anyways, thank you very much for watching and have a good day.